Welcome to tonight's bedtime story. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the gentle rain guide you to sleep. Tonight, we journey into the magical world and let the story begin. Lily and the Leona merchant, who had 3 daughters, was once setting out upon a journey. But before he went, he asked each daughter what gift he should bring back for her. The eldest wished for pearls, the second for jewels, but the third, who was called Lily, said, "Dear father, bring me a rose." Now it was no easy task to find a rose, for it was the middle of winter. Yet as she was his prettiest daughter, and was very fond of flowers, her father said he would try what he could do. So he kissed all 3 and bid them goodbye. And when the time came for him to go home, he had bought pearls and jewels for the 2 eldest, but he had sought everywhere in vain for the rose. And when he went into any garden and asked for such a thing, the people laughed at him and asked him whether he thought roses grew in snow. This grieved him very much, for Lily was his dearest child. And as he was journeying home, thinking what he should bring her, he came to a fine castle. And around the castle was a garden, in one half of which it seemed to be summertime and in the other half winter. On one side the finest flowers were in full bloom, and on the other everything looked dreary and buried in the snow. "A lucky head," said he, as he called to his servant, and told him to go to a beautiful bed of roses that was there, and bring him away one of the finest flowers. This done, they were riding away well pleased, when up sprang a fierce lion, and roared out, "Whoever has stolen my roses shall be eaten up alive." Then the man said, "I knew not that the garden belonged to you. Can nothing save my life?" "No," said the lion, "nothing, unless you undertake to give me whatever meets you on your return home. If you agree to this, I will give you your life, and the rose too for your daughter." But the man was unwilling to do so, and said, "It may be my youngest daughter, who loves me most, and always runs to meet me when I go home." Then the servant was greatly frightened, and said, "It may perhaps be only a cat or a dog." And at last the man yielded with a heavy heart, and took the rose, and said he would give the lion whatever should meet him first on his return. And as he came near home, it was Lily, his youngest and dearest daughter, that met him. She came running and kissed him, and welcomed him home. And when she saw that he had brought her the rose, she was still more glad. But her father began to be very sorrowful, and to weep, saying, "Alas, my dearest child, I have bought this flower at a high price, for I have said I would give you to a wild lion, and when he has you, he will tear you in pieces and eat you." Then he told her all that had happened, and said she should not go, let what would happen. But she comforted him, and said, "Dear father, the word you have given must be kept. I will go to the lion and soothe him. Perhaps he will let me come safe home again. And took leave of her father, and went forth with a bold heart into the wood. But the lion was an enchanted prince. By day he and all his court were lions, but in the evening they took their right forms again. And when Lily came to the castle, he welcomed her so courteously that she agreed to marry him. The wedding feast was held, and they lived happily together a long time. The prince was only to be seen as soon as evening came, and then he held his court. But every morning he left his bride, and went away by himself, she knew not whither, till the night came again. After some time he said to her, "Tomorrow there will be a great feast in your father's house, for your eldest sister is to be married. And if you wish to go and visit her, my lions shall lead you thither." Then she rejoiced much at the thoughts of seeing her father once more, and set out with the lions, and everyone was overjoyed to see her, for they had thought her dead long since. But she told them how happy she was, and stayed till the feast was over, and then went back to the wood. Her second sister was soon after married, and when Lily was asked to go to the wedding, she said to the prince, "I will not go alone this time, you must go with me." But he would not, and said that it would be a very hazardous thing, for if the least ray of the torchlight should fall upon him, his enchantment would become still worse, for he should be changed into a dove, and be forced to wander about the world for 7 long years. However, she gave him no rest, and said she would take care no light should fall upon him. So at last they set out together, and took with them their little child, and she chose a large hall with thick walls for him to sit in while the wedding torches were lighted. But, unluckily, no one saw that there was a crack in the door. Then the wedding was held with great pomp, but as the train came from the church, and passed with the torches before the hall, a very small ray of light fell upon the prince. In a moment he disappeared, and when his wife came in and looked for him, she found only a white dove, and it said to her, "7 years must I fly up and down over the face of the earth, but every now and then I will let fall a white feather that will show you the way I am going. Follow it, and at last you may overtake and set me free." This said, he flew out at the door, and poor Lily followed, and every now and then a white feather fell, and showed her the way she was to journey. Thus she went roving on through the wide world, and looked neither to the right hand nor to the left, nor took any rest. for 7 years. Then she began to be glad, and thought to herself that the time was fast coming when all her troubles should end. Yet repose was still far off, for one day as she was traveling on, she missed the white feather, and when she lifted up her eyes, she could nowhere see the dove. Now, thought she to herself, no aid of man can be of use to me. So she went to the sun and said, Thou shinest everywhere, on the hill's top and the valley steadfast. Thou anywhere seen my white dove? No, said the sun, I have not seen it, but I will give thee a casket open it when thy hour of need comes. So she thanked the sun, and went on her way till even. And when the moon arose, she cried unto it, and said, Thou shinest through the night, over field and grove vast. Thou nowhere seen my white dove? No, said the moon, I cannot help thee, but I will give thee an egg break it when need comes. And she raised up her voice to it, and said, Thou blowest through every tree and under every leaf hast thou not seen my white dove? No, said the night wind, but I will ask 3 other winds. Perhaps they have seen it. Then the east wind and the west wind came, and said they too had not seen it. But the south wind said, I have seen the white dove, he has fled to the Red Sea, and is changed once more into a lion. For the 7 years are passed away. He is fighting with a dragon, and the dragon is an enchanted princess who seeks to separate him from you. Then the night wind said, I will give the counsel. Go to the Red Sea, on the right shore stand many rods, count them. And when thou comest to the 11th, break it off, and smite the dragon with it. And so the lion will have the victory, and both of them will appear to you in their own forms. Then look round, and thou wilt see a griffin, winged like bird, sitting by the Red Sea. Jump onto his back with thy beloved one as quickly as possible, and he will carry you over the waters to your home. I will also give thee this nut," continued the knight. "When you are halfway over, throw it down, and out of the waters will immediately spring up a high nut tree on which the griffin will be able to rest. Otherwise, he would not have the strength to bear you the whole way. If, therefore, thou dost forget to throw down the nut, he will let you both fall into the sea." So our poor wanderer went forth and found all as the night wind had said. And she plucked the 11th rod and smote the dragon, and the lion forthwith became a prince, and the dragon a princess again. But from the spell, then she seized the prince by the arm and sprang on to the griffin's back, and went off, carrying the prince away with her dot. Thus the unhappy traveler was again forsaken and forlorn. But she took heart and said, "As far as the wind blows, and so long as the cock crows, I will journey on till I find him once again." She went on for a long, long way, till at length she came to the castle whither the princess had carried the prince, and there was a feast got ready, and she heard that the wedding was about to be held. "Heaven aid me now," said she, and she took the casket that the sun had given her, and found that within it lay a dress as dazzling as the sun itself. So she put it on, and went into the palace, and all the people gazed upon her, and the dress pleased the bride so much that she asked whether it was to be sold, not for gold and silver, said she, but for flesh and blood. The princess asked what she meant, and she said, "Let me speak with the bridegroom this night in his chamber, and I will give thee the dress." At last the princess agreed, but she told her chamberlain to give the prince a sleeping draught, that he might not hear or see her. When evening came, and the prince had fallen asleep, she was led into his chamber, and she sat herself down at his feet, and said, "I have followed the 7 years. I have been to the sun, the moon, and the night wind to seek thee, and at last I have helped thee to overcome the dragon. Wilt thou then forget me quite?" But the prince all the time slept so soundly that her voice only passed over him, and seemed like the whistling of the wind among the fir trees. Then poor Lily was led away, and forced to give up the golden dress, and when she saw that there was no help for her, she went out into a meadow, and sat herself down, and wept. But as she sat, she bethought herself of the egg that the moon had given her, and when she broke it, there ran out a hen and 12 chickens of pure gold that played about and then nestled under the old one's wings, so as to form the most beautiful sight in the world. And she rose up and drove them before her, till the bride saw them from her window, and was so pleased that she came forth and asked her if she would sell the brood, not for gold or silver, but for flesh and blood. Let me again this evening speak with the bridegroom in his chamber, and I will give thee the whole brood. Then the princess thought to betray her as before, and agreed to what she asked. But when the prince went to his chamber, he asked the chamberlain why the wind had whistled so in the night. And the chamberlain told him all how he had given him a sleeping draught, and how a poor maiden had come and spoken to him in his chamber, and was to come again that night. Then the prince took care to throw away the sleeping draught. And when Lily came and began again to tell him what woes had befallen her, and how faithful and true to him she had been, he knew his beloved wife's voice, and sprang up and said, "You have awakened me as from a dream, for the strange princess had thrown a spell around me, so that I had altogether forgotten you. But heaven hath sent you to me in a lucky hour." And they stole away out of the palace by night unawares, and seated themselves on the griffin, who flew back with them over the Red Sea. When they were halfway across, Lily let the nut fall into the water, and immediately a large nut tree arose from the sea, whereon the griffin rested for a while, and then carried them safely home. There they found their child, now grown up to be comely and fair, and after all their troubles they lived happily together to the end of their days. The fox and the horsey farmer had a horse that had been an excellent, faithful servant to him, but he was now grown too old to work. So the farmer would give him nothing more to eat, and said, "I want you no longer, so take yourself off out of my stable. I shall not take you back again until you are stronger than a lion." Then he opened the door and turned him adrift. The poor horse was very melancholy, and wandered up and down in the wood, seeking some little shelter from the cold wind and rain. Presently a fox met him. "What's the matter, my friend?" said he. "Why do you hang down your head and look so lonely and woebegone?" "Ah," replied the horse, "justice and avarice never dwell in one house. My master has forgotten all that I have done for him so many years, and because I can no longer work, he has turned me adrift, and says, unless I become stronger than a lion, he will not take me back again. What chance can I have of that? He knows I have none, or he would not talk so." However, the fox bid him be of good cheer, and said, "I will help you. Lie down there, stretch yourself out quite stiff, and pretend to be dead." The horse did as he was told, and the fox went straight to the lion who lived in a cave close by, and said to him, "A little way off lies a dead horse. Come with me, and you may make an excellent meal of his carcass." The lion was greatly pleased, and set off immediately. And when they came to the horse, the fox said, "You will not be able to eat him comfortably here. I'll tell you what, I will tie you fast to his tail, and then you can draw him to your den and eat him at your leisure." This advice pleased the lion, so he laid himself down quietly for the fox to make him fast to the horse. But the fox managed to tie his legs together and bound all so hard and fast that with all his strength he could not set himself free. When the work was done, the fox clapped the horse on the shoulder and said, "Jip, Dobbin, Jip." Then up he sprang and moved off, dragging the lion behind him. The beast began to roar and bellow till all the birds of the wood flew away for fright. But the horse let him sing on and made his way quietly over the fields to his master's house. "Here he is, master," said he. "I have got the better of him." And when the farmer saw his old servant, his heart relented, and he said, "Thou shalt stay in thy stable and be well taken care of." And so the poor old horse had plenty to eat, and lived till he died. The blue LIGHT there was once upon a time a soldier who for many years had served the king faithfully, but when the war came to an end could serve no longer because of the many wounds which he had received. The king said to him, "You may return to your home. I need you no longer, and you will not receive any more money, for he only receives wages who renders me service for them." Then the soldier did not know how to earn a living, went away greatly troubled, and walked the whole day, until in the evening he entered a forest. When darkness came on, he saw a light, which he went up to, and came to a house wherein lived a witch. "Do give me one night's lodging, and a little to eat and drink," said he to her, "or I shall starve." "Oh," she answered, "who gives anything to a runaway soldier? Yet will I be compassionate and take you in if you will do what I wish." "What do you wish?" said the soldier. "That you should dig all round my garden for me tomorrow." The soldier consented, and next day labored with all his strength, but could not finish it by the evening. "I see well enough," said the witch, "that you can do no more today, but I will keep you yet another night, in payment for which you must tomorrow chop me a load of wood, and chop it small." The soldier spent the whole day in doing it, and in the evening the witch proposed that he should stay one night more. "Tomorrow you shall only do me a very trifling piece of work. Behind my house there is an old dry well into which my light has fallen. It burns blue and never goes out, and you shall bring it up again." Next day the old woman took him to the well and let him down in a basket. He found the blue light and made her a signal to draw him up again. She did draw him up, but when he came near the edge, she stretched down her hand and wanted to take the blue light away from him. "No," said he, perceiving her evil intention, "I will not give you the light until I am standing with both feet upon the ground." The witch fell into a passion, let him fall again into the well, and went away. The poor soldier fell without injury on the moist ground, and the blue light went on burning. But of what use was that to him? He saw very well, that he could not escape death. He sat for a while very sorrowfully. Then suddenly he felt in his pocket and found his tobacco pipe, which was still half full. "This shall be my last pleasure," thought he, pulled it out, lit it at the blue light, and began to smoke, when the smoke had circled about the cavern. Suddenly a little black dwarf stood before him and said, "Lord, what are your commands?" "What my commands are," replied the soldier, quite astonished. "I must do everything you bid me," said the little man. "Good," said the soldier. "Then in the first place help me out of this well." The little man took him by the hand and led him through an underground passage, but he did not forget to take the blue light with him. On the way, the dwarf showed him the treasures which the witch had collected and hidden there, and the soldier took as much gold as he could carry. When he was above, he said to the little man, "Now go and bind the old witch and carry her before the judge." In a short time she came by like the wind, riding on a wild tomcat and screaming frightfully. Nor was it long before the little man reappeared. "It is all done," said he, "and the witch is already hanging on the gallows." "What further commands has my lord?" inquired the dwarf. At this moment, "None," answered the soldier. "You can return homely be at hand immediately if I summon you. Nothing more is needed than that you should light your pipe at the blue light, and I will appear before you at once." Thereupon he vanished from his sight. The soldier returned to the town from which he came. He went to the best inn, ordered himself handsome clothes, and then bade the landlord furnish him a room as handsome as possible. When it was ready and the soldier had taken possession of it, he summoned the little black mannequin and said, "I have served the king faithfully, but he has dismissed me and left me to hunger, and now I want to take my revenge. What am I to do?" asked the little man. "Late at night, when the king's daughter is in bed, bring her here in her sleep. She shall do servant's work for me," the mannequin said. "That is an easy thing for me to do, but a very dangerous thing for you, for if it is discovered, you will fare ill." When 12 o'clock had struck, the door sprang open, and the mannequin carried in the princess. "Aha! Are you there?" cried the soldier. "Get to your work at once. Fetch the broom and sweep the chamber." When she had done this, he ordered her to come to his chair, and then he stretched out his feet and said, "Pull off my boots!" And then he threw them in her face and made her pick them up again and clean and brighten them. She, however, did everything he bade her, without opposition, silently and with half-shut eyes. When the first cock crowed, the mannequin carried her back to the royal palace and laid her in her bed. Next morning, when the princess arose, she went to her father and told him that she had had a very strange dream. "I was carried through the streets with the rapidity of lightning," said she, "and taken into a soldier's room. And I had to wait upon him like a servant, sweep his room, clean his boots, and do all kinds of menial work. it was only dream, and yet I'm just as tired as if I really had done everything. The dream may have been true, said the king. I will give you a piece of advice. Fill your pocket full of peas and make a small hole in the pocket. And then if you are carried away again, they will fall out and leave a track in the streets. But unseen by the king, the mannequin was standing beside him when he said that, and heard all. At night, when the sleeping princess was again carried through the street, some peas certainly did fall out of her pocket, but they made no track, for the crafty mannequin had just before scattered peas in every street there was. And again the princess was compelled to do servant's work until cock-crow. Next morning the king sent his people out to seek the track, but it was all in vain, for in every street poor children were sitting, picking up peas and saying, "It must have rained peas last night. We must think of something else," said the king. "Keep your shoes on when you go to bed, and before you come back from the place where you are taken, hide one of them there. I will soon contrive to find it." The black mannequin heard this plot, and at night, when the soldier again ordered him to bring the princess, revealed it to him, and told him that he knew of no expedient to counteract this stratagem, and that if the shoe were found in the soldier's house, it would go badly with him. "Do what I bid you," replied the soldier. And again, this third night, the princess was obliged to work like a servant. But before she went away, she hid her shoe under the bed. Next morning, the king had the entire town searched for his daughter's shoe. It was found at the soldier's, and the soldier himself, who, at the entreaty of the dwarf, had gone outside the gate, was soon brought back and thrown into prison. In his flight, he had forgotten the most valuable things he had, the blue light and the gold, and had only 1 ducat in his pocket. And now loaded with chains, he was standing at the window of his dungeon when he chanced to see one of his comrades passing by. The soldier tapped at the pane of glass, and when this man came up, said to him, "Be so kind as to fetch me the small bundle I have left lying in the inn, and I will give you a ducat for doing it." His comrade ran thither and brought him what he wanted. As soon as the soldier was alone again, he lighted his pipe and summoned the black mannequin. "Have no fear," said the latter to his master. "Go wheresoever they take you, and let them do what they will. Only take the blue light with you." Next day the soldier was tried, and though he had done nothing wicked, the judge condemned him to death. When he was led forth to die, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "That I may smoke one more pipe on my way. You may smoke 3, answered the king, "but do not imagine that I will spare your life." Then the soldier pulled out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and as soon as a few wreaths of smoke had ascended, the mannequin was there with a small cudgel in his hand, and said, "What does my lord command? Strike down to earth that false judge there, and his constable, and spare not the king who has treated me so ill." Then the mannequin fell on them like lightning, darting this way and that way, and whosoever was so much as touched by his cudgel fell to earth, and did not venture to stir again. The king was terrified. He threw himself on the soldier's mercy, and merely to be allowed to live at all, gave him his kingdom for his own, and his daughter to wife. The Arabian there was once a queen who had a little daughter, still too young to run alone. One day the child was very troublesome, and the mother could not quiet it. Do what she would, she grew impatient, and seeing the ravens flying round the castle, she opened the window and said, "I wish you were a raven," and would fly away. "Then I should have a little peace." Scarcely were the words out of her mouth when the child in her arms was turned into a raven and flew away from her through the open window. The bird took its flight to a dark wood and remained there for a long time, and meanwhile the parents could hear nothing of their child. Long after this, a man was making his way through the wood when he heard a raven calling, and he followed the sound of the voice. As he drew near, the raven said, "I am by birth a king's daughter, but am now under the spell of some enchantment. You can, however, set me free." "What am I to do?" he asked. She replied, "Go farther into the wood until you come to a house wherein lives an old woman. She will offer you food and drink, but you must not take of either. If you do, you will fall into a deep sleep and will not be able to help me. In the garden behind the house is a large tent heap, and on that you must stand and watch for me. I shall drive there in my carriage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for 3 successive days. The first day it will be drawn by 4 white, the second by 4 chestnut, and the last by 4 black horses. But if you fail to keep awake and I find you sleeping, I shall not be set free." The man promised to do all that she wished, but the raven said, "Alas, I know even now that you will take something from the woman and be unable to save me." The man assured her again that he would on no account touch a thing to eat or drink. When he came to the house and went inside, the old woman met him and said, "Poor man, how tired you are. Come in and rest and let me give you something to eat and drink." "No," answered the man, "I will neither eat nor drink." But she would not leave him alone, and urged him, saying, "If you will not eat anything, at least you might take a draught of wine. 1 drink counts for nothing." And at last he allowed himself to be persuaded, and drank that. As it drew towards the appointed hour, he went outside into the garden, and mounted the tan heap to await the raven. Suddenly a feeling of fatigue came over him, and unable to resist it, he lay down for a little while, fully determined, however, to keep awake. But in another minute his eyes closed of their own accord, and he fell into such a deep sleep that all the noises in the world would not have awakened him. At 2 o'clock the raven came driving along, drawn by her 4 white horses. But even before she reached the spot, she said to herself, sighing, "I know he has fallen asleep." When she entered the garden, there she found him as she had feared, lying on the tan heap, fast asleep. She got out of her carriage and went to him. She called him and shook him, but it was all in vain. He still continued sleeping. The next day at noon, the old woman came to him again with food and drink which he had first refused. At last, overcome by her persistent entreaties that he would take something, he lifted the glass and drank again. Towards 2 o'clock he went into the garden and on to the tan heap to watch for the raven. He had not been there long before he began to feel so tired that his limbs seemed hardly able to support him, and he could not stand upright any longer. So again he lay down and fell fast asleep. As the raven drove along her 4 chestnut horses, she said sorrowfully to herself, "I know he has fallen asleep." She went as before to look for him, but he slept, and it was impossible to awaken him. The following day the old woman said to him, "What is this? You are not eating or drinking anything. Do you want to kill yourself?" He answered, "I may not and will not either eat or drink." But she put down the dish of food and the glass of wine in front of him, and when he smelt the wine, he was unable to resist the temptation and took a deep draught. When the hour came round again, he went as usual unto the tan heap in the garden to await the king's daughter. But he felt even more overcome with weariness than on the 2 previous days, and throwing himself down, he slept like a log. At 2 o'clock the raven could be seen approaching, and this time her coachman and everything about her, as well as her horses, were blacky. She was sadder than ever as she drove along, and said mournfully, "I know he has fallen asleep, and will not be able to set me free." She found him sleeping heavily, and all her efforts to awaken him were of no avail. Then she placed beside him a loaf, and some meat, and a flask of wine, of such a kind that however much he took of them, they would never grow less. After that she drew a gold ring, on which her name was engraved, off her finger, and put it upon one of his. Finally, she laid a letter near him, in which, after giving him particulars of the food and drink she had left for him, she finished with the following words: "I see that as long as you remain here, you will never be able to set me free. If, however, you still wish to do so, come to the golden castle of This is well within your power to accomplish." She then returned to her carriage and drove to the golden castle of Stromberg. When the man awoke and found that he had been sleeping, he was grieved at heart and said, "She has no doubt been here and driven away again, and it is now too late for me to save her." Then his eyes fell on the things which were lying beside him. He read the letter and knew from it all that had happened. He rose up without delay, eager to start on his way and to reach the castle of Stromberg, but he had no idea in which direction he ought to go. He traveled about a long time in search of it, and came at last to a dark forest, through which he went on walking for 14 days and still could not find a way out. Once more the night came on, and worn out, he lay down under a bush and fell asleep. Again the next day he pursued his way through the forest, and that evening, thinking to rest again, he lay down as before. But he heard such a howling and wailing that he found it impossible to sleep. He waited till it was darker and people had begun to light up their houses, and then seeing a little glimmer ahead of him, he went towards it. He found that the light came from a house which looked smaller than it really was, from the contrast of its height with that of an immense giant who stood in front of it. He thought to himself, "If the giant sees me going in, my life will not be worth much." However, after a while he summoned up courage and went forward. When the giant saw him, he called out, "It is lucky for that you have come, for I have not had anything to eat for a long time. I can have you now for my supper." "I would rather you let that alone," said the man, "for I do not willingly give myself up to be eaten." "If you are wanting food, I have enough to satisfy your hunger." "If that is so," replied the giant, "I will leave you in peace. I only thought of eating you because I had nothing else." So they went indoors together and sat down, and the man brought out the bread, meat, and wine, which although he had eaten and drunk of them, were still unconsumed. The giant was pleased with the good cheer, and ate and drank to his heart's content. When he had finished his supper, the man asked him if he could direct him to the castle of The giant said, "I will look on my map. On it are marked all the towns, villages, and houses." So he fetched his map and looked for the castle, but could not find it. "Never mind," he said. "I have larger maps upstairs in the cupboard. We will look on those." But they searched in vain, for the castle was not marked even on these. The man now thought he should like to continue his journey, but the giant begged him to remain for a day or two longer until the return of his brother, who was away in search of provisions. When the brother came home, they asked him about the castle of Stromberg, and he told them he would look on his own maps as soon as he had eaten and appeased his hunger. Accordingly, when he had finished his supper, they all went up together to his room and looked through his maps, but the castle was not to be found. Then he fetched other older maps, and they went on looking for the castle until at last they found it, but it was many 1,000 miles away. "How shall I be able to get there?" asked the man. "I have 2 hours to spare," said the giant, "and I will carry you into the neighborhood of the castle. I must then return to look after the child who is in our care." The giant thereupon carried the man to within about 100 leagues of the castle, where he left him, saying, "You will be able to walk the remainder of the way yourself." The man journeyed on day and night till he reached the golden castle of He found it situated, however, on a glass mountain, and looking up from the foot, he saw the enchanted maiden drive round her castle and then go inside. He was overjoyed to see her, and longed to get to the top of the mountain. But the sides were so slippery that every time he attempted to climb, he fell back again. When he saw that it was impossible to reach her, he was greatly grieved, and said to himself, I will remain here and wait for her." So he built himself a little hut, and there he sat and watched for a whole year. And every day he saw the king's daughter driving round her castle, but still was unable to get nearer to her. Looking out from his hut, one day he saw 3 robbers fighting, and he called out to them, "God be with you." They stopped when they heard the call, but looking round and seeing nobody, they went on again with their fighting, which now became more furious. "God be with you," he cried again, and again they paused and looked about. But seeing no one went back to their fighting. A third time he called out, "God be with you," and then thinking he should like to know the cause of dispute between the 3 men, he went out and asked them why they were fighting so angrily with one another. One of them said that he had found a stick, and that he had but to strike it against any door through which he wished to pass, and it immediately flew open. Another told him that he had found a cloak which rendered its wearer invisible, and the third had caught a horse which would carry its rider over any obstacle, and even up the glass mountain. They had been unable to decide whether they would keep together and have the things in common, or whether they would separate. On hearing this, the man said, "I will give you something in exchange for those 3 things. Not money for that. I have not got, but something that is of far more value. I must first, however, prove whether all you have told me about your 3 things is true." The robbers, therefore, made him get on the horse and handed him the stick and the cloak. And when he had put this round him, he was no longer visible. Then he fell upon them with the stick and beat them one after another, crying, "There, you idle vagabonds, you have got what you deserve. Are you satisfied now?" After this, he rode up the glass mountain. When he reached the gate of the castle, he found it closed, but he gave it a blow with his stick, and it flew wide open at once, and he passed through. He mounted the steps and entered the room where the maiden was sitting with a golden goblet full of wine in front of her. She could not see him, for he still wore his cloak. He took the ring which she had given him off his finger and threw it into the goblet so that it rang as it touched the bottom. "That is my own ring," she exclaimed. "And if that is so, the man must also be here who is coming to set me free." She sought for him about the castle, but could find him no. Meanwhile, he had gone outside again and mounted his horse and thrown off the cloak. When therefore she came to the castle gate, she saw him and cried aloud for joy. Then he dismounted and took her in his arms, and she kissed him and said, "Now you have indeed set me free, and tomorrow we will celebrate our marriage." The golden GOS either was a man who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Dumbling, and was despised, mocked, and sneered at on every occasion. Simpleton, it happened that the eldest wanted to go into the forest to hew wood, and before he went, his mother gave him a beautiful sweet cake and a bottle of wine in order that he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. When he entered the forest, he met a little gray-haired old man who bade him good day and said, "Do give me a piece of cake out of your pocket." and let me have a draught of your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But the clever son answered, "If I give you my cake and wine, I shall have none for myself. Be off with you." And he left the little man standing and went on. But when he began to hew down a tree, it was not. Long before he made a false stroke, and the axe cut him in the arm, so that he had to go home and have it bound up. And this was the little gray man's doing. After this, the second son went into the forest, and his mother gave him, like the eldest, a cake and a bottle of wine. The little old gray man met him likewise, and asked him for a piece of cake and a drink of wine. But the second son, too, said sensibly enough, "What I give you will be taken away from myself. Be off." And he left the little man standing and went on. His punishment, however, was not delayed. When he had made a few blows at the tree, he struck himself in the leg, so that he had to be carried home. Then Dummling said, "Father, do let me go and cut wood." The father answered, "Your brothers have hurt themselves with it. Leave it alone. You do not understand anything about it." But Dummling begged so long that at last he said, "Just go then. You will get wiser by hurting yourself." His mother gave him a cake made with water and baked in the cinders, and with it a bottle of sour beer. When he came to the forest, the little old gray man met him likewise, and greeting him, said, "Give me a piece of your cake and a drink out of your bottle. I am so hungry and thirsty." Dummling answered, "I have only cinder cake and sour beer. If that pleases you, we will sit down and eat." So they sat down, and when Dummling pulled out his cinder cake, it was a fine, sweet cake, and the sour beer had become good wine. So they ate and drank, and after that the little man said, "Since you have a good heart, and are willing to divide what you have, I will give you good luck. There stands an old tree. Cut it down, and you will find something at the root." Then the little man took leave of him. Dummling went and cut down the tree, and when it fell there was a goose sitting in the roots with feathers of pure gold. He lifted her up, and taking her with him, went to an inn where he thought he would stay the night. Now the host had 3 daughters, who saw the goose and were curious to know what such a wonderful bird might be, and would have liked to have one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought, "I shall soon find an opportunity of pulling out a feather," and as soon as Dummling had gone out, she seized the goose by the wing, but her finger and hand remained sticking fast to it. The second came soon afterwards, thinking only of how she might get a feather for herself. But she had scarcely touched her sister than she was held fast. At last the third also came with the like intent, and the others screamed out, "Keep away! For goodness' sake, keep away!" But she did not understand why she was to keep away. "The others are there," she thought. "I may as well be there too," and ran to them. But as soon as she had touched her sister, she remained sticking fast to her, so they had to spend the night with the goose. The next morning, Dummling took the goose under his arm and set out, without troubling himself about the 3 girls who were hanging on to it. They were obliged to run after him continually, now left, now right, wherever his legs took him. In the middle of the fields, the parson met them, and when he saw the procession, he said, "For shame, you good-for-nothing girls. Why are you running across the fields after this young man? Is that seemly?" At the same time, he seized the youngest by the hand in order to pull her away, but as soon as he touched her, he likewise stuck fast, and was himself obliged to run behind. Before long, the sexton came by and saw his master, the parson, running behind 3 girls. He was astonished at this, and called out, "Hi, your reverence, whither away so quickly? Do not forget that we have a christening today." And running after him, he took him by the sleeve, but was also held fast to it. Whilst the 5 were trotting, thus, one behind the other, 2 laborers came with their hoes from the fields. The parson called out to them and begged that they would set him and the sexton free, but they had scarcely touched the sexton when they were held fast. And now there were 7 of them running behind Dummling and the goose. Soon afterwards he came to a city where a king ruled who had a daughter who was so serious that no one could make her laugh. So he had put forth a decree that whosoever should be able to make her laugh should marry her. When Dummling heard this, he went with his goose and all her train before the king's daughter. And as soon as she saw the 7 people running on, one behind the other, she began to laugh quite loudly, and as if she would never stop. Thereupon Dummling asked to have her for his wife, but the king did not like the son and made all manner of excuses and said he must first produce a man who could drink a cellarful of wine. Dummling thought of the little gray man, who could certainly help him. So he went into the forest, and in the same place where he had felled the tree, he saw a man sitting, who had a very sorrowful face. Dummling asked him what he was taking to heart so sorely, and he answered, "I have such a great thirst and cannot quench it. Cold water I cannot stand. A barrel of wine I have just emptied, but that to me is like a drop on a hot stone. There, I can help you," said Dummling. "Just come with me, and you shall be satisfied." He led him into the king's cellar, and the man bent over the huge barrels, and drank till his loins hurt, and before the day was out, he had emptied all the barrels. Then Dummling asked once more for his bride, but the king was vexed that such an ugly fellow, whom everyone called Dummling, should take away his daughter, and he made a new condition. He must first find a man who could eat a whole mountain of bread. Dummling did not think long, but went straight into the forest, where in the same place there sat a man who was tying up his body with a strap, making an awful face, and saying, "I have eaten a whole oven full of rolls, but what good is that when one has such a hunger as I? My stomach remains empty, and I must tie myself up if I am not to die of hunger." At this Dummling was glad, and said, "Get up and come with me. You shall eat yourself full, He led him to the king's palace where all the flour in the whole kingdom was collected, and from it he caused a huge mountain of bread to be baked. The man from the forest stood before it, began to eat, and by the end of one day the whole mountain had vanished. Then Dummling for the third time asked for his bride, but the king again sought a way out, and ordered a ship which could sail on land and on water. As soon as you come sailing back in it, said he, you shall have my daughter for wife. Dummling went straight into the forest, and there sat the little gray man to whom he had given his cake. When he heard what Dummling wanted, he said, since you have given me to eat and to drink, I will give you the ship, and I do all this because you once were kind to me. Then he gave him the ship which could sail on land and water, and when the king saw that, he could no longer prevent him from having his daughter. The wedding was celebrated, and after the king's death, Dummling inherited his kingdom and lived for a long time contentedly with his wife. The water of life long before you or I were born, there reigned, in a country a great way off, a king who had 3 sons. This king once fell very ill, so ill that nobody thought he could live. His sons were very much grieved at their father's sickness, and as they were walking together very mournfully in the garden of the palace, a little old man met them and asked what was the matter. They told him that their father was very ill, and that they were afraid nothing could save him. I know what would, said the little old man. It is the water of life. If he could have a draught of it, he would be well again, but it is very hard to get. Then the eldest son said, I will soon find it. And he went to the sick king and begged that he might go in search of the water of life, as it was the only thing that could save him. No, said the king, I had rather die than place you in such great danger as you must meet with in your journey. But he begged so hard that the king let him go, and the prince thought to himself, if I bring my father this water, he will make me sole heir to his kingdom. Then he set out, and when he had gone on his way some time, he came to a deep valley overhung with rocks and wood. And as he looked around, he saw standing above him on one of the rocks a little ugly dwarf with a sugarloaf cap and a scarlet cloak. And the dwarf called to him and said, Prince, whither so fast? What is that to thee, you ugly imp? Said the prince haughtily, and rode on. But the dwarf was enraged at his behavior, and laid a fairy spell of ill luck upon him, so that as he rode on the mountain pass became narrower and narrower, and at last the way was so straitened that he could not go to step forward. And when he thought to have turned his horse round and go back the way he came, he heard a loud laugh ringing round him, and found that the path was closed behind him, so that he was shut in all round. He next tried to get off his horse and make his way on foot, but again the laugh rang in his ears, and he found himself unable to move a step, and thus he was forced to abide spellbound. Meantime the old king was lingering on in daily hope of his son's return, till at last the second son said, Father, I will go in search of the water of life. For he thought to himself, my brother is surely dead, and the kingdom will fall to me if I find the water." The king was at first very unwilling to let him go, but at last yielded to his wish. So he set out and followed the same road which his brother had done, and met with the same elf, who stopped him at the same spot in the mountains, saying, as before, "Prince, Prince, whither so fast?" "Mind your own affairs, busybody," said the prince scornfully, and rode on. But the dwarf put the same spell upon him as he put on his elder brother, and he, too, was at last obliged to take up his abode in the heart of the mountains. Thus it is with proud, silly people who think themselves above everyone else, and are too proud to ask or take advice. When the second prince had thus been gone a long time, the youngest son said he would go and search for the water of life, and trusted he should soon be able to make his father well again. So he set out, and the dwarf met him too at the same spot in the valley, among the mountains, and said, "Prince, whither so fast?" And the prince said, "I am going in search of the water of life, because my father is ill and like to die. Can you help me? Pray, be kind, and aid me if you can. Do you know where it is to be found?" asked the dwarf. "No," said the prince, "I do not. Pray tell me if you know." "Then, as you have spoken to me kindly, and are wise enough to seek for advice, I will tell you how and where to go. The water you seek springs from a well in an enchanted castle, and that you may be able to reach it in safety, I will give you an iron wand and 2 little loaves of bread. Strike the iron door of the castle 3 times with the wand, and it will open. 2 hungry lions will be lying down inside, gaping for their prey. But if you throw them the bread, they will let you pass. Then hasten on to the well, and take some of the water of life before the clock strikes 12. For if you tarry longer, the door will shut upon you forever." Then the prince thanked his little friend with the scarlet cloak for his friendly aid, and took the wand and the bread, and went traveling on and on, over sea and over land, till he came to his journey's end, and found everything to be as the dwarf had told him. The door flew open at the 3rd stroke of the wand, and when the lions were quieted, he went on through the castle and came at length to a beautiful hall. Around it he saw several knights sitting in a trance. Then he pulled off their rings and put them on his own finger. In another room he saw on a table a sword and a loaf of bread, which he also took. Further on, he came to a room where a beautiful young lady sat upon a couch, and she welcomed him joyfully, and said if he would set her free from the spell that bound her, the kingdom should be his, if he would come back in a year and marry her. Then she told him that the well that held the water of life was in the palace gardens, and bade him make haste and draw what he wanted before the clock struck 12. He walked on, and as he walked through beautiful gardens, he came to a delightful, shady spot in which stood a couch, and he thought to himself, as he felt tired, that he would rest himself for a while. and gaze on the lovely scenes around him. So he laid himself down, and sleep fell upon him unawares, so that he did not wake up till the clock was striking 11:45. Then he sprang from the couch, dreadfully frightened, ran to the well, filled a cup that was standing by him full of water, and hastened to get away in time. Just as he was going out of the iron door, it struck 12, and the door fell so quickly upon him that it snapped off a piece of his heel. When he found himself safe, he was overjoyed to think that he had got the water of life, and as he was going on his way homewards, he passed by the little dwarf, who, when he saw the sword and the loaf, said, "You have made a noble prize. With the sword you can at a blow slay whole armies, and the bread will never fail you." Then the prince thought to himself, "I cannot go home to my father without my brothers. So," he said, "my dear friend, cannot you tell me where my 2 brothers are who set out in search of the water of life before me and never came back? I have shut them up by a charm between 2 mountains," said the dwarf, "because they were proud and ill-behaved and scorned to ask advice." The prince begged so hard for his brothers that the dwarf at last set them free, though unwillingly, saying, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." Their brother, however, was greatly rejoiced to see them, and told them all that had happened to him, how he had found the water of life, and had taken a cupful of it, and how he had set a beautiful princess free from a spell that bound her, and how she had engaged to wait a whole year, and then to marry him, and to give him the kingdom. Then they all 3 rode on together, and on their way home came to a country that was laid waste by war and a dreadful famine, so that it was feared all must die for want. But the prince gave the king of the land the bread, and all his kingdom ate of it. And he lent the king the wonderful sword, and he slew the enemy's army with it. And thus the kingdom was once more in peace and plenty. In the same manner he befriended 2 other countries through which they passed on their way. When they came to the sea, they got into a ship, and during their voyage the 2 eldest said to themselves, "Our brother has got the water which we could not find. Therefore our father will forsake us and give him the kingdom which is our right." So they were full of envy and revenge, and agreed together how they could ruin him. Then they waited till he was fast asleep, and poured the water of life out of the cup, and took it for themselves, giving him bitter sea water instead. When they came to their journey's end, the youngest son brought his cup to the sick king, that he might drink and be healed. Scarcely, however, had he tasted the bitter sea water when he became worse even than he was before. And then both the elder sons came in and blamed the youngest for what they had done, and said that he wanted to poison their father, but that they had found the water of life, and had brought it with them. He no sooner began to drink of what they brought him, than he felt his sickness leave him, and was as strong and well as in his younger days. Then they went to their brother, and laughed at him, and said, "Well, brother, you found the water of life, did you? You have had the trouble, and we shall have the reward. Pray, with all your cleverness, why did not you manage to keep your eyes open? Next year, one of us will take away your beautiful princess if you do not take care. You had better say nothing about this to our father, for he does not believe a word you say. And if you tell tales, you shall lose your life into the bargain. But be quiet, and we will let you off." The old king was still very angry with his youngest son, and thought that he really meant to have taken away his life. So he called his court together and asked what should be done, and all agreed that he ought to be put to death. The prince knew nothing of what was going on, till one day, when the king's chief huntsman went a-hunting with him, and they were alone in the wood together. The huntsman looked so sorrowful that the prince said, "My friend, what is the matter with you? I cannot and dare not tell you," said he. But the prince begged very hard, and said, "Only tell me what it is, and do not think I shall be angry, for I will forgive you." "Alas," said the huntsman, "the king has ordered me to shoot you." The prince started at this, and said, "Let me live, and I will change dresses with you. You shall take my royal coat to show to my father, and do you give me your shabby one?" "With all my heart," said the huntsman. "I am sure I shall be glad to save you, for I could not have shot you." Then he took the prince's coat and gave him the shabby one, and went away through the wood. Some time after, 3 grand embassies came to the old king's court with rich gifts of gold and precious stones for his youngest son. Now all these were sent from the 3 kings to whom he had lent his sword and loaf of bread in order to rid them of their enemy and feed their people. This touched the old king's heart, and he thought his son might still be guiltless, and said to his court, "Oh, that my son were still alive! How it grieves me that I had him killed." "He is still alive," said the huntsman, "and I am glad that I had pity on him. But let him go in peace," and brought home his royal coat. At this the king was overwhelmed with joy, and made it known throughout all his kingdom that if his son would come back to his court, he would forgive him. Meanwhile, the princess was eagerly waiting till her deliverer should come back, and had a road made leading up to her palace, all of shining gold, and told her courtiers that whoever came on horseback and rode straight up to the gate, upon it was her true lover, and that they must let him in. But whoever rode on one side of it, they must be sure was not the right one, and that they must send him away at once. The time soon came when the eldest brother thought that he would make haste to go to the princess and say that he was the one who had set her free, and that he should have her for his wife and the kingdom with her. As he came before the palace and saw the golden road, he stopped to look at it, and he thought to himself, "It is a pity to ride upon this beautiful road." So he turned aside and rode on the right-hand side of it. But when he came to the gate, the guards who had seen the road he took, said to him he could not be what he said he was, and must go about his business. The second prince set out soon afterwards on the same errand, and when he came to the golden road, and his horse had set one foot upon it, he stopped to look at it, and thought it very beautiful, and said to himself, "What a pity it is that anything should tread here." Then he too turned aside and rode on the left side of it. But when he came to the gate, the guard said he was not the true prince, and that he too must go away about his business, and away he went. Now when the full year was come round, the third brother left the forest in which he had lain hid for fear of his father's anger, and set out in search of his betrothed bride. So he journeyed on, thinking of her all the way, and rode so quickly that he did not even see what the road was made of, but went with his horse straight over it. And as he came to the gate, it flew open, and the princess welcomed him with joy, and said he was her deliverer, and should now be her husband and lord of the kingdom. When the first joy at their meeting was over, the princess told him she had heard of his father having forgiven him, and of his wish to have him home again. So, before his wedding with the princess, he went to visit his father, taking her with him. Then he told him everything, how his brothers had cheated and robbed him, and yet that he had borne all those wrongs for the love of his father. And the old king was very angry, and wanted to punish his wicked sons. But they made their escape, and got into a ship, and sailed away over the wide sea, and where they went to nobody knew and nobody cared. And now the old king gathered together his court, and asked all his kingdom to come and celebrate the wedding of his son and the princess, and young and old, noble and squire, gentle and simple, came at once on the summons. And among the rest came the friendly dwarf with the sugarloaf hat and a new scarlet cloak. And the wedding was held, and the merry bells run, and all the good people they danced and they sung, and feasted and frolicked I can't tell how long. The 12 Archwentizemian there was once a king's son who had a bride whom he loved very much, and when he was sitting beside her and very happy, news came that his father lay sick unto death, and desired to see him once again before his end. Then he said to his beloved, "I must now go and leave you. I give you a ring as a remembrance of me. When I am king, I will return and fetch you." So he rode away, and when he reached his father, the latter was dangerously ill, and near his death. He said to him, "Dear son, I wished to see you once again before my end. Promise me to marry as I wish, and he named a certain king's daughter, who was to be his wife." The son was in such trouble that he did not think what he was doing, and said, "Yes, dear father, your will shall be done." And thereupon the king shut his eyes, and died. When therefore the son had been proclaimed king, and the time of mourning was over, he was forced to keep the promise which he had given his father, and caused the king's daughter to be asked in marriage and she was promised to him. His first betrothed heard of this and fretted so much about his faithfulness that she nearly died. Then her father said to her, "Dearest child, why are you so sad? You shall have whatsoever you will." She thought for a moment and said, "Dear father, I wish for 11 girls exactly like myself in face, figure, and size." The father said, "If it be possible, your desire shall be fulfilled." And he caused a search to be made in his whole kingdom until 11 young maidens were found, who exactly resembled his daughter in face, figure, and size. When they came to the king's daughter, she had 12 suits of huntsmen's clothes made, all alike, and the 11 maidens had to put on the huntsman's clothes, and she herself put on the 12th suit. Thereupon she took her leave of her father, and rode away with them, and rode to the court of her former betrothed, whom she loved so dearly. Then she asked if he required any huntsmen, and if he would take all of them into his service. The king looked at her and did not know her, but as they were such handsome fellows, he said, yes, and that he would willingly take them. And now they were the king's 12 huntsmen. The king, however, had a lion which was a wondrous animal, for he knew all concealed and secret things. It came to pass that one evening he said to the king, "You think you have 12 huntsmen?" "Yes," said the king, "they are 12 huntsmen." The lion continued, "You are mistaken. They are 12 girls." The king said, "That cannot be true. How will you prove that to me?" "Just let some peas be strewn in the antechamber," answered the lion. Men have a firm step, and when they walk over peas, none of them stir, but girls trip and skip and drag their feet, and the peas roll about. The king was well pleased with the counsel, and caused the peas to be strewn. There was, however, a servant of the king's who favored the huntsmen. And when he heard that they were going to be put to this test, he went to them and repeated everything, and said, "The lion wants to make the king believe that you are girls." Then the king's daughter thanked him, and said to her maidens, "Show some strength, and step firmly on the peas." So next morning, when the king had the 12 huntsmen called before him, and they came into the antechamber where the peas were lying, they stepped so firmly on them, and had such a strong, sure walk, that not one of the peas either rolled or stirred. Then they went away again, and the king said to the lion, "You have lied to me. They walk just like men." The lion said, "They have been informed that they were going to be put to the test and have assumed some strength. Just let 12 spinning wheels be brought into the antechamber, and they will go to them and be pleased with them. And that is what no man would do." The king liked the advice and had the spinning wheels placed in the antechamber. But the servant, who was well disposed to the huntsman, went to them and disclosed the project. So when they were alone, the king's daughter said to her 11 girls, "Show some constraint and do not look round at the spinning wheels." And next morning, when the king had his 12 huntsmen summoned, they went through the antechamber and never once looked at the spinning wheel. Then the king again said to the lion, "You have deceived me. They are men, for they have not looked at the spinning wheels." The lion replied, "They have restrained themselves." The king, however, would no longer believe the lion. The 12 huntsmen always followed the king to the chase, and his liking for them continually increased. Now it came to pass that once, when they were out hunting, news came that the king's bride was approaching. When the true bride heard that, it hurt her so much that her heart was almost broken, and she fell fainting to the ground. The king thought something had happened to his dear huntsman, ran up to him, wanted to help him, and drew his glove off. Then he saw the ring which he had given to his first bride, and when he looked in her face he recognized her. Then his heart was so touched that he kissed her, and when she opened her eyes he said, "You are mine, and I am yours, and no one in the world can alter that." He sent a messenger to the other bride and entreated her to return to her own kingdom, for he had a wife already, and someone who had just found an old key did not require a new one. Thereupon the wedding was celebrated, and the lion was again taken into favor because, after all, he had told the truth. The king of the Golden Emerald went, and there was once a merchant who had only one child, a son that was very young and barely able to run alone. He had 2 richly laden ships then making a voyage upon the seas, in which he had embarked all his wealth, in the hope of making great gains, when the news came that both were lost. Thus from being a rich man he became all at once so very poor that nothing was left to him but one small plot of land. And there he often went in an evening to take his walk, and ease his mind of a little of his trouble. One day, as he was roaming along in a brown study, thinking with no great comfort on what he had been and what he now was, and was like to be, all on a sudden there stood before him a little, rough-looking, black dwarf. "Prithee, friend, why so sorrowful?" said he to the merchant. "What is it you take so deeply to heart? If you would do me any good, I would willingly tell you." said the merchant. "Who knows but I may," said the little man. "Tell me what ails you, and perhaps you will find I may be of some use." Then the merchant told him how all his wealth was gone to the bottom of the sea, and how he had nothing left but that little plot of land. "Oh, trouble! Not yourself about that," said the dwarf. "Only undertake to bring me here 12 years hence, whatever meets you first on your going home, and I will give you as much as you please." The merchant thought this was no great thing to ask, that it would most likely be his dog or his cat or something of that sort, but forgot his little boy, so he agreed to the bargain and signed and sealed the bond to do what was asked of him. But as he drew near home, his little boy was so glad to see him that he crept behind him and laid fast hold of his legs and looked up in his face and laughed. Then the father started, trembling with fear and horror, and saw what it was that he had bound himself to do. But as no gold was come, he made himself easy by thinking that it was only a joke that the dwarf was playing him, and that, at any rate, when the money came, he should see the bearer and would not take it in. About a month afterwards he went upstairs into a lumber room to look for some old iron, that he might sell it and raise a little money. And there, instead of his iron, he saw a large pile of gold lying on the floor. At the sight of this he was overjoyed, and forgetting all about his son, went into trade again, and became a richer merchant than before. Meantime little Heinel grew up, and as the end of the 12 years drew near, the merchant began to call to mind his bond, and became very sad and thoughtful, so that care and sorrow were written upon his face. The boy one day asked what was the matter, but his father would not tell for some time. At last, however, he said that he had, without knowing it, sold him for gold to a little ugly-looking black dwarf, and that the 12 years were coming round when he must keep his word. Then Heinel said, "Father, give yourself very little trouble about that. I shall be too much for the little man." When the time came, the father and son went out together to the place agreed upon, and the son drew a circle on the ground, and set himself and his father in the middle of it. The little black dwarf soon came and walked round and round about the circle, but could not find any way to get into it, and he either could not or dared not jump over it. At last the boy said to him, "Have you anything to say to us, my friend, or what do you want?" Now Heinel had found a friend in a good fairy that was fond of him, and had told him what to do. For this fairy knew what good luck was in store for him. "Have you brought me what you said you would?" said the dwarf to the merchant. The old man held his tongue, but Heinel said again, "What do you want here?" The dwarf said, "I come to talk with your father, not with you." "You have cheated and taken in my father," said the son. "Pray, give him up his bond at once." "Fair and softly," said the little old man. "Right is right. I have paid my money, and your father has had it and spent it. So be so good as to let me have what I paid it for. You must have my consent to that first, said Heinel. So please to step in here and let us talk it over. The old man grinned and showed his teeth, as if he should have been very glad to get into the circle if he could. Then at last, after a long talk, they came to terms. Heinel agreed that his father must give him up, and that so far the dwarf should have his way. But, on the other hand, the fairy had told Heinel what fortune was in store for him if he followed his own course, and he did not choose to be given up to his humpbacked friend, who seemed so anxious for his company. So, to make a sort of drawn battle of the matter, it was settled that Heino should be put into an open boat that lay on the seashore hard by, that the father should push him off with his own hand, and that he should thus be set adrift and left to the bad or good luck of wind and weather. Then he took leave of his father and set himself in the boat, but before it got far off a wave struck it, and it fell with one side low in the water. So the merchant thought that poor Heinel was lost, and went home very sorrowful, while the dwarf went his way, thinking that at any rate he had had his revenge. The boat, however, did not sink, for the good fairy took care of her friend, and soon raised the boat up again, and it went safely on. The young man sat safe within, till at length it ran ashore upon an unknown land. As he jumped upon the shore, he saw before him a beautiful castle, but empty and dreary within, for it was enchanted. "Here," said he to himself, "must I find the prize the good fairy told me of." So he once more searched the whole palace through, till at last he found a white snake lying coiled up on a cushion in one of the chambers. Now the white snake was an enchanted princess, and she was very glad to see him, and said, "Are you at last come to set me free? 12 long years have I waited here for the fairy to bring you hither as she promised, for you alone can save me. This night 12 men will come. Their faces will be black, and they will be dressed in chain armor. They will ask what you do here, but give no answer, and let them do what they will be, whip, pinch, prick, or torment who bear. Only speak not a word, and at 12 o'clock they must go away. The second night 12 others will come, and the third night 24, who will even cut off your head. But at the 12th hour of that night their power is gone, and I shall be free, and will come and bring you the water of life, and will wash you with it, and bring you back to life and health." And all came to pass as she had said. Heino bore all, and spoke not a word. And the third night the princess came, and fell on his neck and kissed him. Joy and gladness burst forth throughout the castle. The wedding was celebrated, and he was crowned king of the Golden Mountain. They lived together very happily, and the queen had a son, and thus 8 years had passed over their heads, when the king thought of his father, and he began to long to see him once again. But the queen was against his going, and said, "I know well that misfortunes will come upon us if you go." However, he gave her no rest till she agreed. At his going away, she gave him a wishing ring and said, "Take this ring and put it on your finger. Whatever you wish it will bring you. Only promise never to make use of it to bring me hence to your father's house." Then he said he would. "Do what?" she asked, and put the ring on his finger, and wished himself near the town where his father lived. Hino found himself at the gates in a moment, but the guards would not let him go in because he was so strangely clad. So he went up to a neighboring hill where a shepherd dwelt and borrowed his old frock, and thus passed unknown into the town. When he came to his father's house, he said he was his son, but the merchant would not believe him, and said he had had but one son, his poor Hino, who he knew was long since dead. And as he was only dressed like a poor shepherd, he would not even give him anything to eat. The king, however, still vowed that he was his son, and said, "Is there no mark by which you would know me if I am really your son?" "Yes," said his mother. "Our Heinel had a mark like a raspberry on his right arm." Then he showed them the mark, and they knew that what he had said was true. He next told them how he was king of the Golden Mountain and was married to a princess and had a son 7 years old. But the merchant said, "That can never be true. He must be a fine king, truly, who travels about in a shepherd's frock." At this, the son was vexed, and forgetting his word, turned his ring and wished for his queen and son. In an instant they stood before him, but the queen wept and said he had broken his word, and bad luck would follow. He did all he could to soothe her, and she at last seemed to be appeased. But she was not so in truth, and was only thinking how she should punish him. One day he took her to walk with him out of the town, and showed her the spot where the boat was set adrift upon the wide waters. Then he sat himself down and said, "I am very much tired. Sit by me. I will rest my head in your lap and sleep a while." As soon as he had fallen asleep, however, she drew the ring from his finger and crept softly away and wished herself and her son at home in their kingdom. And when he awoke, he found himself alone and saw that the ring was gone from his finger. "I can never go back to my father's house," said he. "They would say I am a sorcerer. I will journey forth into the world till I come again to my kingdom." So saying, he set out and traveled till he came to a hill where 3 giants were sharing their father's goods. And as they saw him pass, they cried out and said, "Little men have sharp wits. He shall part the goods between us." Now there was a sword that cut off an enemy's head whenever the wearer gave the words, "Heads off," a cloak that made the owner invisible or gave him any form he pleased, and a pair of boots that carried the wearer wherever he wished. Heinel said they must first let him try these wonderful things, Then he might know how to set a value upon them. Then they gave him the cloak, and he wished himself a fly, and in a moment he was a fly. "The cloak is very well," said he. "Now give me the sword." "No," said they, "not unless you undertake not to say, 'Heads off,' for if you do, we are all dead men." So they gave it him, charging him to try it on a tree. He next asked for the boots also, and the moment he had all three in his power, he wished himself at the Golden Mountain, and there he was at once. So the giants were left behind with no goods to share or quarrel about. As Heinel came near his castle, he heard the sound of merry music, and the people around told him that his queen was about to marry another husband. Then he threw his cloak around him and passed through the castle hall and placed himself by the side of the queen where no one saw him. But when anything to eat was put upon her plate, he took it away and ate it himself. And when a glass of wine was handed to her, he took it and drank it, and thus, though they kept on giving her meat and drink, her plate and cup were always empty. Upon this, fear and remorse came over her, and she went into her chamber alone, and sat there weeping, and he followed her there. "Alas," said she to herself, "was I not once set free? Why then does this enchantment still seem to bind me? False and fickle one," said he. "One indeed came, who set the free, and he is now near thee again. But how have you used him? Ought he to have had such treatment from thee?" Then he went out and sent away the company, and said the wedding was at an end, for that he was come back to the kingdom. But the princes, peers, and great men mocked at him. However, he would enter into no parley with them, but only asked them if they would go in peace or not. Then they turned upon him and tried to seize him, but he drew his sword. "Heads off," cried he, and with the word the traitors' heads fell before him, and Heinel was once more king of the Golden Mountain.